Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to dive into a little bit about you and your story. Would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what were you doing before you decided to change careers into UX?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Alisha. I'm currently a UX designer at Wolters Kluwer, and prior to making the career transition into UX design, I was working in marketing for a little over 3 years. I received my bachelor's degree in psychology, and so marketing felt like sort of a natural career path for me at the time. I always tell people if I knew what UX was, if I knew that UX existed at that time, things might have gone differently. I might have gotten here, without that transition. But yeah, that's a little bit about me and my background.
Nice. So you graduated college with your psychology degree, you went into marketing. In those 3 years, like what point were you like, oh, maybe I should check out or like explore other careers, or was it just like UX just kind of popped up and you were like, I should look into that? That sounds cool. Like how did you discover UX?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It was honestly a little bit of both. I was getting a little bored, I guess, with the day-to-day of marketing. I felt like I wanted to hone my creativity a little bit more in my career. And at the same time, I had started this marketing role at a startup. And so you always hear when you're working at a startup that, it involves wearing many hats. And that's kind of exactly what it was. I was one of, 2 members of the marketing team at that time. So a lot of the work that I was doing also involved things that you might not typically expect from a marketer, like creating a website and, coming up with graphics for ads and things like that. And the more that I spent time doing those kinds of tasks, the more I realized that they were sort of more in line with what I wanted. And I had expressed this to my partner, and one day he happened to be on TikTok and he saw an ad for Avocademy, and he was like, hey, like, I know that you've expressed interest in doing things that might be similar. Maybe this is something you want to check out. So I enrolled in Avocademy. Actually, at the time, my goal was to use Avocademy to learn a little bit more about those UX skills so that it could further my marketing career. So I actually wasn't fully planning on a career transition at the time, just sort of maybe like a lateral movement within the marketing sphere. But, the more I went through the course, the more I enjoyed it and realized that this is kind of what I want to be doing full time.
Nice. So you weren't even considering a full career change. We kind of like convinced you as you went
Yeah,
along.
exactly.
Around what time was this? Like what year, what month, where did you sign up for the program?
So this was almost exactly a year ago. So spring of 2022. I think in May is when I enrolled in foundations.
Nice. And how long did it take you to go through that program? Was it like 2 months, 3 months? Like how do you remember?
Yeah, I believe it took me a little over 2 months. I received my certificate, I want to say like the first week of July. So just around 2 months.
Nice. So you finished foundations. Did anything surprise you about your experience in foundations in terms of like what UX was, right? From like the TikTok and what UX appears to be, and then actually going through the program and being hands-on, working on that case study. Was anything surprising to you? Like it was harder, it was easier, you already kind of knew stuff, but didn't know the words for it. Like what was that experience from your marketing experience?
Yeah, it definitely surprised me. I think my understanding of UX before I actually began my UX journey was the same understanding that a lot of like misinformed people have about UX, which is like it's kind of just like glorified graphic design. So I was, expecting to be in Figma the whole time. I didn't really know that there was this whole process and this like focus on empathy, like really empathizing with the user. And that definitely came as a surprise to me, but I think if anything, it was a pleasant surprise because I was able to sort of leverage some of my background in psychology, and, combined with some of the skills that I had from my marketing career. Like, for example, marketing research is sort of tangential to UX research. I would say like the main difference is the empathy. But yeah, I think overall it was really exciting to learn that there are all these like different facets of UX design, and it's so much more than, you know, designing beautiful screens. Like, of course, that's an aspect of it, but I really like that it's about understanding the end user and really diving in to create something that will benefit them and their experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very well said. So you finish foundations, right? And at this point, you could have made that lateral move, right? Like you've accomplished kind of the goal you've set out to accomplish, which was to like learn some additional skills to, you know, further your marketing career. Where was the moment where you were like, oh, maybe I should consider a career in UX, which I'm assuming you made that decision before you joined CJ, right? Like there was something there that changed. Well, talk us through kind of like what that was or felt like.
Yeah, I would say this was, you know, this decision was sort of like brewing in the back of my mind about like halfway through the foundations course. I was just really enjoying my time. I would say like, honestly, right after the personas activity, I really enjoyed that activity. And I feel like around module 3 of the foundations course is really when I started, you know, understanding, like, I don't know, the blocks started kind of fitting together. And I was like, yeah, I think this is something I could do full time. And then with module 4 and 5, you know, wireframing and just being able to develop my Figma skills, those just, you know, solidified my decision for wanting to pursue this as a full-time career. And I knew even before I graduated from foundations that I would want to apply to CJ.
Nice. That's great. So did you apply to CJ right away? Did you take a break? Like what did that timeline look like from when you finished foundations to when you started CJ?
Yeah, I got the email saying I received my certificate for foundations, and like a minute after that, I applied for CJ. So it was very much like I knew that I wanted to, you know, head into Career Jumpstart. I knew that I wanted to make this career transition, and I didn't really want to waste any time in doing that.
That's awesome. So you joined CJ. How many projects did you do? How long did that take? I'm assuming, you know, the 2 months ish. And yeah, what industries were your projects in?
Yeah, so I did 3 projects during my time in CJ. The third project was done in parallel with my job search, so that didn't count in like the 2 months that I'd spent working on the first 2. But my first project was in the nonprofit sector, specifically for an NGO that was focused on making exercise and fitness more accessible for veterans. And I'd never worked in this kind of industry before. So it was a really great experience. And we essentially redesigned their whole website to make it easier for people in their district to be able to find them. The second project that I worked on, this was actually through a client that I knew personally. So I initially was thinking about, you know, freelancing with this client. But once I got into CJ, I was like, it would just be so much easier if I had a team of other designers to help with this. So this was for an online gaming organization that wanted to use gaming and gamification to make veganism more accessible to you know, people of broad backgrounds. And then the final project that I worked on in parallel with my job search, that was for startups in general. It was with a client who wanted to make different sorts of templates more accessible to leaders starting their own companies. So if you think about like Canva templates, something similar to that.
Nice. That's awesome. Lots of different broad experiences in your projects. Definitely. That's great. So you start your job search. Where are we at now? June, July, August, September-ish, October-ish. How long did the job search take? This was last year, right? 2022. Yes. Yeah. How long was your job search period? Share a little bit about that and how it went.
Sure. So yeah, I did start my job search beginning of September 2022. And I was very fortunate. For me, the job search only took about a month. So I had my full-time offer by the first week of October, which was really great. A couple things that I did that I think really helped with the job search. Were to ask for feedback following interviews. I had one interview that I had gotten past the design challenge stage before I got ultimately rejected from the role. And obviously that was very heartbreaking at first because I'd spent, so much time and energy on this design challenge. But they did get back to me with some feedback, which I think ultimately helped me with my design skills and my presentation skills during the interview. Another thing that I did that actually helped me land my current role was to leverage my connections. So as I was on LinkedIn looking at roles, if I saw that I had a mutual connection, I would reach out to them to see if they could put me in touch. Like having been on the other side of the process, I know that like how easily applications can get tossed out. So I think that having that extra backing of someone, within the company, within that inner circle already knows me and can vouch for me, it really means a lot in the long run.
Yeah, that's great. You got a job within 1 month of starting to apply in probably like one of the toughest seasons of job applications, because this is right around the time that all like the layoffs, right? Like the big tech layoffs started to happen. So that's amazing. Congrats. So when did you start your job right away? Did you take a little bit of a break? And tell us about, the last 6 months in this job. Like how has it been? Do you like it better than marketing? How's the experience so far?
Sure. Yeah, I started my job about a month, maybe like 3 weeks after I got the offer. Just wanted to make sure that I had time to wrap things up at my previous role. And then it was kind of an interesting time to start because I had, about a month of work before, Thanksgiving and the holidays hit. So it was definitely a weird time to be onboarded. And I think at the beginning, things were a little slow. But after the holidays, the pace picked up significantly. I really enjoy the work that I'm doing right now. It's so multifaceted. We have some projects that are more research focused and some that, are just visual design or maybe a little bit of UX design and then UI design. So it's really nice that I get to explore, all of those different areas of UX UI design within my role. I think that foundations and Career Jumpstart, of course, set me up really well. In fact, there are some times when I get asked something, I'll still open up the foundations course because I know there's like a module or an article about it, and I'll bookmark that so I can reference it later. But overall, I really enjoy being able to use those techniques. I think one of the more interesting parts of the job that I maybe hadn't expected, or that I guess I knew, but it was more different experiencing it, is that, projects tend to be much shorter or longer than, what is expected of the foundations project. And so you're not always going to start from, okay, like, let me define the problem. Now let me conduct secondary research. Now let me interview people. Sometimes, what you need to do is you have 2 weeks to redesign that website. Okay, so if I only have 10 business days, I'm not going to start all the way from the beginning. So kind of being able to look at a project when it comes to you, and even wear the UX hat to figure out what sorts of techniques and processes and timeline you'll have to adapt is something that I think is so important, and that is different from, UX in the real world versus what you see in a boot camp or a course.
Yeah. And recently we've actually added some more content around setting expectations for the real world. Because this is something I kind of kept hearing over and over again. And in my head, I was like, oh, I thought it was obvious that we were teaching you the happy path. Like if you had all the time in the world, this is what you would do, right? So now we're actually starting to teach it in a way that we talk about tools, right? Like the process are a bunch of tools in your toolbox. that when you start, a new project, you can decide which tools you're going to pull out based on the time, the constraints, right? The budget, like all of that information. So we're trying to little by little help everyone understand that you're not always going to have the privilege or the time and money to do the full process, right? And do interviews and do it like in 10 business days, right? There's like no way you can fit all of that in there. So I love that you brought that up. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your current job or the experience as a whole with folks listening?
Yeah, I think to anyone who's, currently in foundations or thinking about enrolling in foundations, I would say, the mentorship for me is what really made this experience so valuable. I think it's so great that, Avocademy offers a way for students to not only learn the content that they need to succeed, but also be able to network with real world professionals while doing so, get advice from them, learn from them. I think that's such a value add, and it's definitely, what helped me throughout this process. So I would encourage anyone listening to take advantage of those resources.
Yeah, no, that's great. You stole my last question, which is typically what would you say to someone that's considering this career change? I think for you, it was pretty obvious, right? Given your background, like you have the psychology degree, you have the marketing experience, you're super well spoken, which we can tell from this, conversation we're having today. So I think you had all the pieces, and I'm sure it was an easier decision to like explore the career. What would you say to someone that maybe like doesn't have all those pieces, right? And is trying to decide if they should take the next step?
Yeah, so I really just believe in the power of storytelling and knowing your why. And I think that that's what, sets someone up for success in transitioning to UX or really just transitioning careers into any field. But for UX specifically, because it is such like a process-oriented field, I think another thing that job interviewers look for, that employers look for is being able to identify a candidate who can clearly explain how they got from point A to point B. And that, obviously the portfolio is one way to gauge that, but another way is just, how can they explain why the skills that they already have from, their education, from their previous jobs, from any other classes they may have taken, how do those transfer and intersect with ones that they would be utilizing in this field? And I think that coming up with, your story, your reason for why that is what makes, the process go smoother and what makes you stand out as a candidate.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very well said. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I really, really appreciate your time. Super proud of everything you've accomplished and really wishing you the best in the rest of your career.
Thank you so much. It was great speaking with you, and thank you for organizing this.
Of course.